benchmarking is incredibly important to give the executive team and operating units a sense of the comparables and to look at it at a detailed level, to understand how they stand vis-a-vis their peers. And one of the things we at OPEXEngine work on quite a bit is understanding what makes a group of companies peers. It's traditionally, a lot of people have said, well, my peers are my comparable companies selling the same product. But if you think about it, in any market, you'll have a couple of really big companies, a couple of mid-sized companies, some startups, all selling the same product, maybe to the same customers. But in terms of the structure of your company, you shouldn't look like the really humongous company you're competing against. What you want to do is find companies with the same business model at the same stage of development. So if you're selling big enterprise deals of $250,000 in subscriptions every year, and you have an expensive direct sale enterprise sales organization, you want to compare yourself to companies like that with roughly similar revenues, and not to a company that's selling tens of thousands of $1,000 product that has a very sort of, even if they're a business-to-business software company, you don't want to be comparing yourself to them when they're more like a consumer product. And they're going to put all their expenses into an inbound marketing strategy as compared to spending a lot of money on very expensive salespeople. So we do a lot of work on defining peers. We do a lot of work on understanding what metrics are important for driving performance and driving revenue growth primarily, and growing companies. And the key thing that we've found is that metrics are really relative. A lot of times people get hung up on one particular metric. Well, what's my cost of customer acquisition? My cost of customer acquisition is $8,000 to acquire a customer. Well, that's fabulous. That's really inexpensive. Well, and I shouldn't say 8,000, I should say 80,000. We see a lot of companies with a cost of customer acquisition in that range. That sounds like maybe that's very high, but if you're selling a product with a higher contract value and you're selling it on a subscription basis and your gross margin is high and your churn rate is low, so that your lifetime customer value is a couple $1 million, $80,000 to acquire that customer is pretty good. But if you're selling a very low-priced, little gadget that you're making maybe $10,000 a year on a customer, if your acquisition cost is $80,000, then that's not very good, and that's something obviously it's not going to work in the long term. So all the metrics are relative. We did a great study last year in looking at the differences between East Coast and West Coast companies and software companies, and looking at different expense rates. And definitely salaries were about 40% higher on the West Coast than on the East Coast for software companies of the same size with roughly the same business model. Facilities expenses were much higher on the West Coast than on the East Coast if you average it out. But within the context of the West Coast, most companies sort of fall within a standard range. So you can't compare yourself to, other companies on the East Coast are getting great employees or getting great facilities for much less. So everything is relative from that perspective.